Shalom, brothers and sisters. Shalom. Giving honor and praise unto the Most High, the Creator and the Maker of heaven and earth. My name is Yeshaya Yisrael of the tribe of Dan of the nation of Israel. We do not, brothers and sisters, intend for this presentation to be long. Nonetheless, brothers and sisters, as was anticipated from last week, Friday, we did not do the presentation. So the presentation has now been postponed to tonight. For those who are in the room, for those who will be joining on, for those who are interested, thank you for your time. Last time we went over this particular matter, we spoke upon the history of the Israelites. We spoke upon the matter of the Israelites in history. And brothers and sisters, this is going to be, as pointed out, one of the last history presentations that's going to be done for a while. And the reason, brothers and sisters, is because we want to focus on books. We want to, brothers and sisters, focus on getting information out there to the people. We want to, brothers and sisters, focus on other matters regarding getting things accomplished. We welcome you all to this presentation. We hope you all enjoy it. We hope you all are able to leave your comment upon it. And brothers and sisters, we definitely, as I continue to share the link with many, we hope you all are able to understand. I can be reached at the number 908-587-4841. It's going to be in the description once this is uploaded as well. And I am open to constructive criticism, brothers and sisters. That is to say, not trying to be funny and sounding it. Constructive criticism is criticism that is constructive, not destructive. All right? So, brothers and sisters, with the time allotted, giving honor and praise unto the Most High, the Creator and the Maker of heaven and earth. On a human level, giving due respect to my lady, Sarah Michaela, the moderator in the room, and giving a shout out to the congregation that I frequent and am a part of, Shomrei Habrit. We spent the time of Shavuot, or Chag Shavuot, or the Feast of Weeks there, say a little over 2 weeks ago. And brothers and sisters, it was a very joyful time. And we intend, brothers and sisters, to have more of those joyful times. So, without any further ado, let us get into this. Comment, like, share, subscribe to the channel. Thank you for such. We are going to pull this up, the PowerPoint. And move on from there. To recap, we were last talking, brothers and sisters, about what happened when the Greco Empire, that is to say the empire of the Greeks, fell to Rome, and the transition in the world that happened then in relation with the house of Israel. And we're going to continue in said same vein. We wanted to pick this time, brothers and sisters, because while our people are attentive to talk about history, attentive to hear about history, we wanted to, from us as the house of Israel, explain why we say what we say regarding history. You understand? So on the channel More Yeshaya Torah Lessons, and on the channel More Yeshaya History Lessons, the number 2, you'll see part 1 of this. We're going to continue from slide 18 all the way to slide 40 and then close out. My information is on the screen, 908-587-4841. Anyone who cares to donate, the Cash App is, I'm going to put in here, all right, Frank Sons 1, put $ in this particular case. All right, so let's just look back at this right here. When we talked about the Maccabees, and we went over the list from Judah Maccabees all the way down to the time of Pompey and what happened in such manner. And they gave dates and names and so forth and so on. We now want to continue in this. And let's go on, brothers and sisters, with the time allotted. The Hasmoneans in the era of Pompey had Hyrcanus II as their leader, but he was a ward of Antipater. The Hasmoneans, brothers and sisters, were Israelites that descended from the Maccabees. The Maccabee independence was from 143 to 63 BCE. Pompey dying in 48 BCE. The time when Pompey was not in Jerusalem, we see Crassus in the temple. He was part of the Romans, and he stole from the temple. Crassus died in 53 BCE. When Crassus died, the Israelites struck for freedom. This was part input down by one named Longinus. He sold, check this out now, he sold 30,000 Israelites into slavery. You can go into Oxford History of the Roman Empire to confirm this kind of info. Antipater, who was of Esau, was Pompey's buddy. He died in 43 BCE. When Antipater died, Parthia set up Antigonus as king. Now, Parthia were the Persians that we spoke upon in the past that actually fought in part on behalf of Israel. He was the last Hasmonean king. Antigonus was killed by Mark Antony. Mark Antony was defeated by Octavian. Octavian later on was known as Augustus, the first Roman emperor. So we want to show how this history ties in. Antony committed suicide eventually. Herod, son of Antipater, became friends with Augustus. Herod defeated the Parthians of Rome, and Rome set him up as a leader. Now, Shalom, Sarah Michaela, Shalom, Uziel Israel, Shalom, Abadia Israel. Thank you for joining on. What do we want to point out with this right here? Herod was an Edomite, an Idumean. The Romans were called Edomites, brothers and sisters, in what is referred to as the Dead Sea Scrolls, simply because if Edom and Jacob are brothers, and the Romans are being accompanied by Jacob's brother, Israel will be focused more on the fact that, oh, wow, my brother is against me. They expected Rome. They didn't really expect Edom to be connected with that. So that's why we can see why the Romans were called the Edomite Empire, for a lack of a better term. The Romans themselves being, in layman terms, Italians. Herod, he sought a tie with Rome in status. In his life, he made sure some of the Hebrew culture was cut off and that Greece came into place. We discussed previously that the Greek nude images is what turned some Israelites off from the rays of Herod. Now, Herod died in 4 AD. Brothers and sisters, let's look at this particular matter for edification purposes, if we will. When we get into this, Herod, set up by Rome as a leader, why do you think today, knowing the matter and spirit of Esau or Edom, you find it to where people are saying, well, do you find anything about Israel before Herod? The reason why they focus on Herod in the debate world is because they too, like Herod, were against the Israelites. So when we begin to show in archaeology, as in the book that is presented, brothers and sisters, Israelite history as it relates to the world. Yeah, I got the book right here. Let me show real quick from the collection of books that's here. In this book right here, brothers and sisters, Israelite history as it relates to the world, I chronicled the matter of the Maccabees in history and how that connection came into play. In the book, brothers and sisters, as we see here, Israelite history as it relates to the world, also is chronicled the matter of how the Israelites were known to be who they were during the era and during the time of Charles V. In this book right here, From Assyria to America, Part 2, brothers and sisters, I show in pictures the history of the Israelites and not just the words of it itself. So I want to advertise a little bit regarding the books. Those who do want it, you can get it from me or you can get it online. So let us continue in this particular case. The son of Herod named Archelaus was given the area that Judah was by Augustus. So the Romans gave the Edomites land that was within the tribe of Judah. It should be noted that the place called the Sanhedrin was first dominated by Israelites during the era of the Seleucids. Taking it back to the Seleucids, brothers and sisters, we're getting back to when the Greeks was ruling. This is why we wanted to show from the last time we went over this, the era between the Greek rule and them losing to Rome and the effect of the house of Israel upon such, or due to such. But by the time Herod and Archelaus came on the scene, it was run by Idumean and Roman people. So the Sanhedrin or the Beit Din or the house of judgment, where the people came for decision making in the time of the Seleucids, was actual Israelites. By the time you get to when Herod comes on the scene, the Israelites are replaced in the Sanhedrin by the Edomites. Let's go on. This is why the doctrine of the later Talmud is curved toward not making too strict the ways of Torah being observed. What do I mean by that? The argument given to us as Old Testament-based Israelites is that the Talmud is said to be part of what the prophets heard of old, and it mysteriously began to just go from generation to generation, and then it was codified and so forth and so on. But brothers and sisters, such was not and is not the case. There is no set oral law. There is no set code of, quote, oral law. There is a written law that the prophet Moses was given, and he was supposed to teach Israel, which he did, and then Israel is supposed to teach by the priesthood, and then from the priesthood to the Israelites as stated, and then to the parents teaching their children. Shalom, my queen, Sarah Michaela Yisrael. All right, so these are just things we want to point out for reference purposes with the time allotted. Let's go on to the next slide. After the era of Augustus, we see Tiberius. After Tiberius, we see Caligula. Both Caligula and Claudius were friends with the grandson of Herod, who was Agrippa II. It should be noted that the Israelites during this time were under subjugation of the Roman, meaning the Roman Empire. Tacitus, the Roman historian, points out that the Roman Emperor Caligula wanted his image in the temple. The Israelites refused, say to Titus, and was willing to fight instead. So what are we pointing out? Yeah, we're talking about Caligula, who slept with his sister knowingly. It's not like it was a broken family and then you found out later when you was living a loose life already who you were sleeping with. We're talking about Caligula who married his horse. We're talking about Caligula who the Romans wanted to put to death on account that he had a banquet or party, if you will. And what he decided to do was have everybody come together. And everybody sleeps with somebody else's wife. Orgy style sex thing. But the thing was, you wasn't supposed to be one of the men sleeping with your wife. So now let's look at this. The Roman people were okay with their wives being in the orgy, providing they were one of the men in that orgy. You understand? The Romans was upset, not because their wife is with another man, intimately, if you want to use that term loosely. You understand? But was upset because he couldn't be one of the men that was with his wife while his wife was with another man. So we could begin to see that Rome being that beast that it talks about in the book of Daniel, chapter 7, verse 7, the undescribable beast. What Daniel saw and how it made him sick. The book of Josephus, speaking about Daniel and the prophecies therein, expounds upon it by the same way a brother does. Or should I say, I do as Josephus does. Babylon, Media, Persia, Greece, and Rome. Some people say it's Babylon, Persia, Media, and Greece. But such is not accurate. Daniel chapter 7, verse 7, when it speaks upon that beast that broke up the earth and stomped the residue with the feet thereof. And it was diverse from the beast that were before it. And so forth and so on. And how they had a little horn. And that little horn came out after defeating 3 of the other ones. In the book here, brothers and sisters, advertising during the Juneteenth thing, if we will, this book right here, Deuteronomy 28, 15 to 68, I expound upon how, brothers and sisters, the book of Daniel speaks upon it and what those horns represented and so forth and so on. So for those who are interested, you can get this book online or you can get it by contacting me, 908-587-4841. And yes, in due respect, throughout the presentation, I'm going to show my books and advertise it. All right, so now let's look at this, brothers and sisters. During the time of Caligula, then Claudius, we see that the Israelites in part formed what is called the Sicarii or the Zealots. They were willing to kill Israelites who were willing to conform to Rome. In the time of Nero, which is after Caligula, there was a Roman procurator named Florus. He too stole money from the temple, and the Israelites revolted on account of such. So now we could begin to see Israel being robbed and plundered, robbed and plundered, robbed and plundered. Do you know, for what it's worth, Michael Moore, the one who did that thing called Fahrenheit 9/11, spoke upon it saying when America just wants to rob somebody of all the nations within it, they do it to the said African American. So we have been robbed and plundered, like Deuteronomy 28 points out, from Rome and before and even after Rome. Let's go on, brothers and sisters. The Israelites also during this time fought among themselves while being oppressed by the Romans. Sounds like black people in America. So what am I pointing out? While being oppressed, brothers and sisters, you have it to where Israelites are oppressing themselves. How is it after Sean Bell is shot with 50 bullets in 2006 in the borough of Queens in New York, did brothers run up inside the barbershop and shoot a brother that was working in the barbershop? How does that happen in the same borough? That's something that just cannot be fathomed. You understand? So while sadly we were being oppressed by the Romans, we were oppressing ourselves. Just as much as we are being oppressed by the descendants of the Romans, we are still sadly oppressing ourselves. Let's go on, brothers and sisters. The army of Florus crucified Israelites and sold Israelites into slavery. The Israelites too participated in slaying other Israelites, and in 68 AD, they killed 12,000 of their own people. Do you know that today is generally understood that there's 6,000 or so or more on average of black on black crime? When you watch that show that comes on YouTube or cable even, forgetting the exact name, it's something about for my lover, for my friend, for whatever. And in general, what the show is about is women who kill for their husbands or their boyfriends and so forth, which is ridiculous. You understand? So we don't want that to be our legacy. We don't want what they call world star hip hop smackdown videos to be what our children are looking at 20 years later. You understand? We want to talk about Granville T. Woods, the inventor, Elijah McCoy, the inventor. We want to talk about Denmark Vesey. We want to, brothers and sisters, talk about the Latimer brothers. We want to talk about Robert Smalls, Sojourner Truth, Harriet Tubman, Malcolm X, Martin Luther King. And yeah, I'm an Israelite who talks about Martin Luther King because in his last speech, he talked about the Israelites. Did you know that? Let's go on and check out his speech when you get the chance. The last speech he made April 3rd, 1968. And then ask yourself, who are the Levites that he's talking about? Let's go on into this. Next slide, please. The people of Caesarea killed 20,000 Israelites, and those of Damascus, 10,000. The Israelites, like the blacks of today, of which they are, formed against those while who oppressed them, but did not check themselves on the internal oppression occurring. So what are we talking about, brothers and sisters, in this case? While there were organizations of the house of Israel, brothers and sisters, while we were talking about that as a people, we were still oppressing ourselves and not fully addressing such manners. They keep oppressing us. They keep oppressing us. And it's true. But Israel, you slaying your own warriors. While you're talking about the nations oppressing you, you are perhaps slaying those who could defend you. So we don't want to be, brothers and sisters, the whole head sick manner. You understand? That's not the portion that we want to be. We want to be better than that. There's nothing arrogant about being better than those who made errors. There's nothing arrogant about that at all, brothers and sisters. And so let us continue in this. All right. The Israelites, like the blacks of today, of which they are, the Israelites saw that the Romans were not willing to make peace. Then, like Jesse Jackson, were blacks of today seen as cowards. What am I pointing out? When a football player or when someone, say, as Jesse Jackson, tries to quell the spirit of black people of today, don't worry about what's going on. Don't worry about what's going on. We have to worry about what is going on, brothers and sisters. We have to know that within this week, when a 13-year-old black male unarmed is shot by the police, that's a problem. And to talk about the police attacking other races doesn't fix our situation. Sometimes people try to pacify us with that. Well, they do things to other people too. So in other words, forget what your drama is because others got drama as well. Not realizing everybody's drama is real to him or her. So like the pacifist spirit, that if Martin Luther King in his last speech before he was assassinated on a balcony in Tennessee, speaking about the Levites, so you now would have someone such as Jesse Jackson talking about I am somebody and you're somebody too. If Martin Luther King was talking about the Levites, wouldn't Jesse Jackson have an idea of who the Levites were he was talking about? These are things we want to point out for reference purposes. Shout out to everybody in the room. If I can be heard, please give me a 1. All right. Thank you, my love, Sarai, for being there. Told out for that. Nero committed suicide. We ain't even want to talk about what Nero was into. We got gross enough with Caligula. Vespasian, the next Roman leader, now comes to the scene, and the Edomite leader, Agrippa II, is accompanying him. Vespasian went in time, to Rome, and his son Titus laid siege upon Jerusalem. Michael Grant, citing a person who's a historian, in his book, The History of Ancient Israel, states the following. After urges surrender in vain, Titus pressed on with the siege. He succeeded in capturing the temple, which was totally consumed by flames. Elsewhere in Jerusalem, however, the Jewish resistant groups, although weakened by famine, continued to hold out, while Titus's soldiers were permitted to plunder, massacre, and burn. Finally, after a defense that had lasted for 4.5 months, every part of the city had fallen. As in other parts of Judea, huge numbers of prisoners were taken, destined for execution or starvation or slaughter and gladiatorial shows. Anyone able to claim a connection with the house of David was also hunted down and eliminated. So according to Michael Grant, brothers and sisters, he was saying that anybody who is able or was able to show a connection to the house of David was hunted down. Now, what can we gather from that? This is not to sound racial. If anyone in their 80s or so, or in their 90s, was shown to be part of the Nazis, did you know that the Jewish people were up there trying to say they should still be incarcerated for former crimes? Do you know that they locked up somebody that was in their 80s and or 90s back in the 1990s for being a former Nazi? Now, once it comes down to us, when we talk about 50 or plus years of what happened, such as the sittings, 60, 70 years ago, when we were not allowed to go in certain places, when the black women in the time of President Roosevelt had to sing outside the White House because she wasn't allowed inside the White House, even though Michelle Obama later on said black people built the White House, which we did. We're told to get over it. Now, if the European Jews that you see in the land of Israel are the true house of Israel, and knowing that vindictive spirit to want to incarcerate a man 80 or 90 years old for his former crimes as a Nazi, why is it that while they are in the land of Israel, they do not hunt down the descendants of the Ptolemies and the Seleucids? Why is it that they do not sit there, brothers and sisters, and hunt down the descendants of the Caesars? If your ancestors is who Michael Grant there is talking about, that was being hunted down and put in gladiatorial shows and made to starve to death, why are you not trying to get back at the descendants of Titus, the family of Vespasian, the family of the Ptolemies and the Seleucids before that? It's because, Khazars, you know that who the Romans was doing that to was whom the Romans said looked like Ethiopians. You don't look like you're from Ethiopia, sir. You know that it was your ancestors put by them in the ovens. You know, it was your ancestors that had a bucket for the head, a bucket for the leg, and a bucket for that. Whereas my ancestors were the ones that was put in a cauldron and then cooked in slavery. It was my ancestors, while we talk about Juneteenth and things of that kind of nature. that had their penises cut off and then it was hung up as a trophy. It was my ancestors who went through that. So this is why you cannot in your spirit go against the descendants of the Caesars of Rome. You cannot go up against the Catholic Church of Rome because you know that it was not your descendants that Titus and his brother Domitian went against. You don't have the spirit Khazars, European Jewry, and so forth and so on, to even go up and approach, like Malcolm X was going to approach the world court on account of racism. You being as powerful as you are in this society, to have it to where the book that's written called The Secret Relation Between Blacks and Jews, published by the Nation of Islam, Jewish man, you had that book put on blacklist. You can't find that book no more. That's how much clout you got. You can take a whole organization's book and make sure nobody else can sit there and buy it. But you won't go up against those people because you know exactly who's who. You understand? So let us continue, brothers and sisters, in this manner. History shows us that Titus died in 81 AD and Domitian died in 96 AD. It is understood that Domitian was assassinated. Both Domitian and Nerva banned circumcision. Hadrian, the successor of Trajan, made war against the Israelites, and in the year 132 and ended in 135 CE. Now, while we talk about Domitian and his brother Titus, I want to, while talking about Juneteenth and so on, show and advertise this book here. This book is called, brothers and sisters, From Assyria to America. All right, you can get this book that has what we're talking about plus more info concerning the matter. All right. My lady Sarai wrote, it is indicated that there is no statute of limitations on war crimes as defined by the Charter of Nuremberg International Military Tribunal in 1945 or crimes against humanity, as defined by the Nuremberg International Military Tribunal and the 1948 Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of Crime of Genocide. However, slavery is considered a war crime and genocide against humanity. Yet, there has not been no punishment or justice for the victims of the slave trade. That is very true. And for anybody wondering about, well, how do you know about slavery's existence? All you got to do is look at your passport and the name on it. If your name is not identified with the people of the East where we were taken from, yeah, that's a sign. If the last name is Hutchinson, as you see here on the book, if the last name is Carter, like the rapper Jay-Z, if the last name is Jones, like the rapper Nas, and Nas actually found where his ancestors was on the plantations, yeah, that's a sign right there. You understand? So we're walking with the marks of slavery. Smith, Cooper, Johnson, Peterson, Harris, Westbrook, etc. And then make you pay to get your name changed. Make you pay after working, after you filled out the application online or offline, and charge you to get your name changed. This man is something else. Yeah, when it says in Deuteronomy, rouse you to jealousy with that which is not a people, yeah, you something else to sit there and put names and charge to get name changed back to what they wanted. All right, but we're going to go on in this particular case, brothers and sisters, with the time allotted. And this goes as such. It is now 10:06 p.m. We intend to go no longer than 10:30 with the time allotted. Thank you. Let's go on in this. Some historians state that the Israelites during the time from Titus to Hadrian migrated to Europe on their own accord. However, such is not the case. In the Apocrypha, now mind you, my lady Sarai bought me my last Apocrypha. Shout out to her for that. In the Apocrypha, we see the brethren, the Jews that be in Jerusalem and in the land of Judea, which unto the brethren, the Jews that throughout Egypt, health and peace. So hold on. You have, according to the Apocrypha in Second Maccabees, which dates to the era when the Greco-Roman Empire was going on, it says that the Jews, the Israelites, were in Egypt and Judea. Okay, let's go on. The Israelites of their own accord did not go to European places since the days of Solomon, king of Israel. Israel had been going to Africa. The Bible in First Kings tells us that Solomon married a daughter of a pharaoh. This, of course, was a marriage for peace relations between the kingdoms. Some state that the gold of Solomon had is now in what we call Zimbabwe. Why then would a people who are used to going to African places since the era of King Solomon on their own accord go to European places when being chased by Europeans? The Romans came from the north and attacked the Israelites. It will be illogical, in other words, make no sense, for the Israelites to go north on their own volition, seeing their enemy was coming from the north. Next slide. The Israelites during the time of the Romans migrated to Egypt, and south of Egypt to Ethiopia, and west of Ethiopia to West Africa. To this day, there are Israelites in Ethiopia, Ghana, Nigeria, Mauritania, and Liberia. The Israelites adopted names for themselves such as Ashanti, Igbo, Mandika, and Fulani. Maurice Abadi, a French historian, because sometimes we got to cite these other nations in order for us to be believed, sadly. But let's go on, no slander intended. Maurice Abadi, a French historian, asserts that the Semitic origin of the Fulani of the Niger cannot be questioned. He believes Jews from North Africa also joined their brethren many years later, in the 2nd century AD, to found the Empire of Ghana. There are others that say this holds credence since there are Fulani found in Senegal and the Cameroons. Now, you can find more info on what I just spoke upon by going to the book. Nope, it's inside my bag. Don't have it on me here. Called From Babylon to Timbuktu by Rudolf Windsor gets into that. In 1528, Rabbi Abraham ben Eliezer Halevi reported that the tribes of Dan and Gad were living in Ethiopia. In 1542, Rabbi Moses Basola of Ancona went on a pilgrimage to the Holy Land. When he arrived in Beirut, he met 4 Jews from Babylonia. One named Moses stated to Basola he heard of Arabs who had seen it with their own eyes that there was indeed such thing as the Symbotnian River, and that the, quote, sons of Moses inhabited there without a doubt. Now, what am I pointing out in that? When you go to a book called Lost Jews, Last of the Ethiopian Philosophers, written by a guy named Louis Rappaport, it talks upon a thing called the Symbotnian River, the Beta Yisrael, who are called philosophers. They state that this river opens up on Shabbat, but they don't travel so far on Shabbat, so they always are not able to get back into the land outside of an airplane. Now, looking upon it in that particular way, there are groups that's not so-called Falasha that say that they are part of the sons of Moses. The Zagwe people, I'm going to type that in there. You can look this up yourself. All right, Zagwe people. They state in part that they don't even come from Judah, but actually from Levi himself. So something to be noted and point out. So when we talk about this diaspora, I wanted to have to show where we're coming from and what we're talking about. J.A. Rogers stated West Africa has black Jews also. Now, in the camp teaching that was done this past Shabbat, I went over the account of Oluda Equiano, and I'm going to restate it here in this presentation. Subscribe to the channel Shomrei Habrit. I'm going to type that channel in there. Shomrei Habrit. You can look that up online, and we're asking you to subscribe to that channel as well. Kane, thank you for that. My lady wrote, I have read that Israelites also ruled most of Europe after Severus during the Dark Ages. All right, now we talk about Septimus Severus. Thank you, my lady, for typing that in. That's very true. There were Israelites that were ruling in Europe after that era, what they call the Dark Ages. And after the Dark Ages, you get what they call what? The Renaissance. Renaissance meaning rebirth. And that's when you find people like James Ussher. You may want to look them up in history. James Ussher, brothers and sisters, was the person that was in part responsible to making sure Europe had no memory of Black presence in its past. Shalom, Ima, Sylvia Havens. How are you doing, Ima? Nice to see you. So just want to point that out for reference purposes. Ethiopia's earliest Christian rulers, the kings of the Solomonic dynasty, claimed to be descendant of King Menelik, the firstborn of Solomon and Sheba, queen of the ancient Ethiopians. There are some who deny that Solomon, king of Israel, and the queen of Sheba were, for the lack of a better term, intimate. But in due respect that people are people, the Bible says that he gave the queen all her desire. So why would we deny that a queen went to go and see a king and she didn't leave with a baby? We know Rehoboam took over the throne, but we know too about Solomon and his number of women. So that is not far-fetched to believe. In the time of Abraham, when they went to go and they did see the king of Egypt, did they not want to sit there and have Sarai inside the room with the leader? Some cultures are into those kind of matters and into those kind of things. Next slide, please. Rulers of the Zagwe dynasty traced their ancestry all the way back to Moses, the dynasty overthrown in 1270. There is abundant information concerning the Israelites being scattered into African places. It only reasons with the understanding the Israelites being in Europe was by force and not by choice. What am I pointing out? When you read about the Israelites that was in Alexandria, Egypt, that was taken by Titus to Italy, that's how we can see that. You understand? We pointed this out inside the book here for advertisement purposes, From Assyria to America. Again, this is the last presentation that we intend to do online in history for a while, so I could focus on other books and focus on my relationship with my loved woman. There is abundant, okay, we read that part. The Israelites were noted for being in West Africa. The next people to attack the Israelites were the Arabs. Joseph Williams, in his book, Hebrewisms of West Africa, stated the following. In the 7th year of the Hagera, 629 AD, Muhammad assembled a force of 1,600 warriors and marched against the Jewish strongholds of Khabar. The Jews were subjugated or slain, and there was much booty, including a new wife for the prophet, meaning prophet of Islam. The attacks on the people in West Africa from the Arabs is not to be denied. Queen Kahina, as we spoke upon before in this presentation in the past, that is called Simeon and Dan. You can look that up on the channel, Warrior Shire History Lessons, and you can type in Simeon and Dan, and you can see more info on that. Who lived in Algeria in the 7th century AD, is noted as a woman who was of the Berber Jews who went against the Arabs. So we want to, brothers and sisters, point that out for reasonable purposes. The Israelites were noted as being part of the people dispersed throughout Africa, citing Joseph Williams again. We did this on Shabbat. We're going to do it again. John Olseby stated, many Jews are scattered throughout this region. Many natives, boasting themselves of Abraham's seed, inhabiting both sides of the river Niger. Others are Asian strangers who fled thither, meaning there, either from the desolation of Jerusalem by Vespasian, or from Judea, wasted and depopulated by the Romans, Persians, Saracens, and Christians, or else such as came out of Europe where they were banished, etc. So, brothers and sisters, Let us continue. The slave trade in West Africa brought down the great empires that had existed. The slave trade started to go from West Africa first to Europe and then to the West. The first slave ship to go west is dated by many in 1518, though there were blacks enslaved in Hispaniola in 1501, shows that black people existed in the Western Hemisphere prior to coming to West Africa as captives. Now, let's go on. In 1591, the Empire of Songhai fell to the Spaniards and the Moors. The Moors we are speaking of are they who were kicked out from Spain by Isabella and Ferdinand in 1492. Now, these are the grandparents of Charles. All right, we're going to speak about Charles. Oh, matter of fact, we ain't going to talk about it because it's mentioned in the book. Let's look. We're going to this book right here. Brothers and sisters, I'll talk about that. I want to show where, brothers and sisters, I did speak upon such. All right. In this particular manner. In this book here, you can get online. It's called Israelite History as it relates to the world. All right. A brother, creator willing, we intend to come out with more books in said manner and so forth and so on. I'm going to, brothers and sisters, read parts of this for edification purposes. In this book here, Israelites History as it relates to the world, part of it says the following. Jews first settled in the country now known as Tripoli, but the celebrated Arabian historian Ibn Khaldun asserts that the Defosi, an ancient tribe of Luwata, the Libyans of antiquity, themselves professed Judaism, a fact which had, he asserts, hereto been unrecorded by Jewish historians. There is an old tradition among the nomadic tribes of Tunisia, which is in North Africa, that the Jews settled in the country before the destruction of the first temple. There can be little doubt that the colonies of Jews existed in Carthage soon after the building of the city. It is impossible, however, even to conjecture that the Jewish population of Carthage may have been when that renowned city and republic challenged the Roman Empire for the mastership of the world. What is pointed out right here, sorry, in this book, sorry about the stumbling in that case. I did spell it right. I read it wrong. Sorry. Is that Israelites was already in Carthage in that particular manner about what happened with Israel later on going into Charles V, the grandson of Isabel and Ferdinand. We want to point this out again. This book right here, Israelite History as it relates to the world, for more information. Thank you for the time. Thank you, love, for putting in the link for that. All right. The Spanish were heavily involved in the slave trade. In 1494, we note the Treaty of Tordesillas, in which Spain and Portugal divided the Western Hemisphere for themselves. The natives were enslaved first, and then the two-faced gentlemen, we're going to keep the language clean, petitioned the King of Spain, Charles V, to have slaves brought from Africa to come to West. You heard of Bartolome de las Casas? He's mentioned in the book written by Eric Williams. Eric Williams was the former prime minister of Trinidad and Tobago in the 1960s and 70s. In his book, Documents of West Indian History, Eric Williams talks about Bartolome de las Casas and how he petitioned the grandson of Isabel and Ferdinand, Charles V, to have people brought from West Africa as slaves to the Western Hemisphere. All right. We're going to continue with the time allotted in this case. Next slide, please. Wow or well, that's how I was told to either pronounce it. Goncalves in 1491 brought slaves to Portugal. He worked for Henry the Navigator. When Christopher Columbus set sail in 1492, there were 1,000 blacks sent to Europe yearly. In 1513, there were 30 blacks as slaves with Balboa. In 1519, there were 300 blacks as slaves when Cortez went to conquer Mexico or Mexico. When Pizarro was killed in 1541, it was his black slaves who carried his body. It was thought in 1538 that the first blacks were brought to Brazil, to what is called the United States. There were blacks brought as slaves by Lucas alone in 1526. There were blacks as slaves in 1565 in what is called St. Augustine, Florida. Florida was operated by the Spaniards until 1819, and then in 1845 it became a state. Florida was not part of the colonies. The colonies ended in 1776. The Spaniards brought blacks as slaves to what is now called Jamaica in the 16th century. The British attempted to involve themselves in the Asiento. The Asiento, it was a wicked, though quote legal, document that was used by the oppressors to, in their own way, say that they have the right to enslave us. And known as known, John Hawkins participated in the trade of blacks and slaves, such as Venezuela and Mexico. Elizabeth I had a guy named John Hawkins who worked in the slave trade. He died, brothers and sisters, before the year 1600. So we know 1619 is not the date when our enslavement started. Let's go on. John Hawkins, it should be noted, did not come to what is commonly called the United States of America, nor did Columbus. In the video done in the past called Hebrew and Mesoamerica, you can look that up online. Hebrew and Mesoamerica. In that video, I chronicled the travels of Cristobal Colon, who was an Italian Jewish man working for the Spanish. Shalom, Elgin Barrow. Shalom, my woman, Sarah Michaela. Shalom, Elder Sylvia Haven. Shalom, Ima. How you doing? Shalom to everybody in the chat. Shalom, Uziel, Yisrael. If that's the same Uziel I'm talking about, brother, thank you for the support. And Shalom, Obadiah, Yisrael, and everybody else who's in the room and or will join. I want to apologize, Elgin Barrow, because I saw your comment last Friday when I wasn't able to do the presentation. I was too exhausted. All right. I apologize to the people who I saw later on wondering what happened. My bad for that. Okay. Shalom. Let's continue and close out. According to Daniel Mannix in his book, Black Cargoes, A History of the Atlantic Slave Trade. You can get this book right here. Black Cargoes. Very well documented. Right? Let's go on. It says concerning Alexander Falconbridge, he described this slave ship as follows. Some wet and blowing weather having occasion of portholes to be shut and a grating to be covered. Fluxes and fevers among the Negroes ensued. Do you know what a flux is? A flux is similar to when a discharge known today as syphilis and or gonorrhea comes from your genitals. Sorry about that, family, is what in part happened with us as a people on the ships. Let's continue. The deck, that is the floor of their rooms, was so covered with blood and mucus, which had proceeded from them in consequence of the flux, that it resembled a slaughterhouse. He was on a slave ship as the quote doctor. In the 15th century, the slave trade went into effect. In the 16th century, it continued, such as in the case of Archduke Charles, granting monopoly having blacks sold as slaves in what is now Florida in 1517. In 1518, a grant was given to Lawrence Germanat to bring blacks as slaves to the West Indies. In 1561, Cortez conquered the Aztecs and formed what became known as, quote, New Spain. In the book here, Advertising from Assyria to America, all right, I talk about what we just discussed in there. In 1562, the French attempt to colonize Florida. John Hawkins, as noted, is involved in 3 expeditions, 1562, 1564, 1567. The last 2 were financed by Elizabeth I. Megan, whatever her name is, that's married to that guy, the prince, married into the slave trading family. Brothers and sisters, let us continue in like such manner. In the 17th century, we noted that the slave trade was rife, that's to say in the 1600s. In 1621, the Dutch had blacks as slaves in Brazil. The same year, the Dutch West India Company was created. Slavery gained legal status, though it was present already in places such as Maryland and Virginia in 1661 and 1663, respectively. In 1692, the Portuguese created the slave company Chacao, Cacheo. You can look that up even on Google. In 1667, there was an act made to regulate the blacks as slaves in the New England plantations. The governor of Maryland, Leonard Calvert, in 1641 had slaves. Thus, the idea of Anthony Johnson, as we always point out, as the pioneer of American slavery in 1655 is false. So this is something we just want to point out in that particular case. There were several presidents of the United States who had slaves. Washington, Jefferson, Madison, Monroe, Jackson, Burr, Harrison, Tyler, Polk, Taylor, the father-in-law of Jefferson Davis, Johnson, Lincoln's successor, and Grant all had blacks as slaves. Brothers and sisters, let's not forget this history as we talk about it. We talked about the diaspora begin to see how those who were cited as being in West Africa, such as by J.A. Rogers, Joseph Williams, we now see what happened with their descendants being brought over here. We're just going to read the last part of this one right here. It should be interesting to note that Louisiana is named after Louis XIV of France by Cavalier. The same Louis XIV created the slave codes in 1685, which spoke of how much food a slave should get, and if a slave ran away for over a month, he will have his ears cut off and branded. Now, this is your famous King Louis XIV of France. Slaves who hit the slave master or the master's family were executed under these black codes. So you can go on 1685 slave code by Louis XIV. So these things, you can Google this kind of information. So we don't want to sit there and minimalize and act as if our people didn't go through X, Y, and Z, and so forth and so on. Nor do we want to separate the West Indian and the African American. And I say this in no disrespect. When you start talking about 1619 is the beginning of our captivity, you forget everything that happened with Jamaica, Trinidad, Barbados, and even in Brazil and Guyana. We don't want to do that. We're not minimalizing things. When George Washington made sure it was magnified by trading people between the United States and Barbados. Let's go on. John Winthrop and his deputy, Governor Thomas Dudley, had blacks as slaves in Massachusetts in the 1640s. Governor George Yardley had blacks as slaves in Virginia before 1630, since he died in 1627. George Yardley, I first heard about him by reading a book called Story of the American People by Paul Johnson. Paul Johnson, correct me if I'm wrong, is a white man. And he wrote a book. And in a book about the story of the American people, there's no way that he could gloss over slavery like it didn't happen. That's when I first heard about George Yardley. And then I looked him up, I'm like, hold on, he's a slave master. Wow. Again, in 1619 matter, what made that Dutchman of war go to the English and give him and sell 20 Negroes? Because the slave trade was already in commission. That's why the Dutchman was comfortable to do it. Let's go on, brothers and sisters. Going to read the last part of this one right here. Johann de Willem in 1625 received a license to trade blacks as slaves between Virginia, Brazil, and Guinea. The Dutch captured Portuguese slave ships in the 1630s. E. Downing in 1645 spoke of getting slaves from the West Indies for Massachusetts. Let's go on and see what we're talking about. Brothers and sisters, the British, the Portuguese, the Dutch, the French, the Spaniards were all partners in the enslavement of our people. You even had the Irish that was a part of it regarding the driving of the slave ships. We do not want to, brothers and sisters, minimize the struggle that we've gone through as a people. I wanted to end at 10:30, but we'll take it maybe to 10:45. And I thank you all for the time and participating and liking, commenting, and sharing and subscribing. Please do so. I want to, on a human level, after we spoke upon what we went through as a people, acknowledge the camp that shows a brother love, Shomrei Habrit. I've known the brother Maury Yivtak. Don't know if he's able to participate at this time, what to do to the hour. But I wanted to give due respect upon never in the time I've known him. He asked me not to always state the exact years. Never saw that brother move funny style. Nah. Shout out to the sisterhood that is there, that's online in the camp Shomrei Habrit. You can actually look up their channel online. They have in cohesion with a congregation called Beit Shalom, a food pantry, love thy neighbor. And while we talked about the Romans having a starving, we want to, while we among these modern Romans for edification purposes, feed our people. While we talk about the matter of being hung, we want to be able to, in respect, hold our brother down, hold our sister down, help out your people. The slave masters only got strength because we did not unite. Did you know that? Do you know that's why they felt they had to chain and tie you up? Because they knew you were stronger than them? You understand? So we want to promote the congregation there, Shomrei Habrit, and the food pantry that they do and operate. All right? Ezekiel 18 talks about those feeding their neighbor. Deuteronomy chapter 15 talks about helping out your people. And we want to point that out for edification purposes. Shalom, Sister Yakia. You wrote in Shalom Mishpachah. Let's go over that real quick in Hebrew verbally. The word shalom comes from the word shalom. The word shalom is a verb meaning to be complete. Mishpachah is a noun. It comes, brothers and sisters, from the word shapak, which means to serve. Shepak means servant. As brothers and sisters, shifka means female servant. So when you add the mem to shapak or shipka, masculine and feminine, you get family, because that's what family does. Why do you think as a people, even without knowing Hebrew, we call our friends who help us, yo, that's fam? I remember, may he rest in peace, the rap star Freaky Ty from the Lost Boys. May he rest in peace. Another senseless death among us as a people, but we want to show what we're talking about. I met him when I was, say, 17 years old. I met the rapper Freaky Ty, who was part of the Lost Boys group. And my friend that was with me, he asked him, while we was in Queens, those who know Queens, the Lost Boys rap group was known for talking about God Brewer and 134. Those who know Queens know exactly what I mean by that. Right? My friend asked Freaky Ty, are you fam? In other words, LBF or Lost Boys fam. Freaky Ty was the rapper. I think his name is Raymond in his regular name, if I'm not mistaken. He looked at me and he looked at my friend who was with me in 1997 on God Brewer. I, at the time, as stated, was 17 years old. And my friend again asked him, or he didn't ask him twice because that didn't go that far. But he asked him, he said, are you fam? And Freaky Ty looked at us and he said, I can't get his voice, but he said, am I fam or you fam? My point in emphasizing that is even our people who may not know Hebrew are definitely connected by just saying fam. The night that me and my friend on God Brewer, I believe it was either after the Shabbat may have been, or maybe a Tuesday night, whatever like that. When we met him inside the supermarket or the store that was on God Brewer at the time, he decided to rhyme for the guy, Freaky Ty, who was already a known rapper. Very artistic rhyming skill. Looking upon it now, brothers and sisters, I saw at least, just me and my friend being two of us, Freaky Ty the rapper must have had at least no less than 18, 19 brothers in his crew that was around him that night. It was packed. And it was love and it was respect. It wasn't no rah-rah, no drama, no beef, no static, nothing negative. You understand? And my friend found it to be an honor to rhyme or rap, very good rapper at that, in front of the presence of Freaky Ty. So what am I pointing out and saying all of that for this? You never know what influence you have. Morey Mishael, may he rest in peace. I felt honored at the age of 18 to sit next to Morey Mishael. You understand? I tell the brothers who are out of the congregation DCB, Mishpachah drummers, as they call themselves, that while you're out there teaching the younger generation to drum, you know, or maybe you don't know, what kind of influence you're going to have upon that 10, 15, 20 years later. Brothers and sisters, I want to show a book that one of the people influenced me in getting the language wrote. This book here is Hebrew is Easy, Volume 6. This one's dedicated to my mom, by the way. May she rest in peace. And brothers and sisters, this book right here, So You Want to Learn Hebrew, you can get this book by looking up the information by getting this book. It's not on Amazon, but this book here, Hebrew is Easy, is. You never know, family, what influence you may have on someone else. You never know who's watching you. You never know who's considering. You never know, because I'm going to say this. In the last video that I did upon this, it had close to 100 views at the end of it. I only see less than 20 people in the chat. So who are these other said 90 people? Point is, people watch. So keep your nose clean, House of Israel. Shout out to the congregation Shomrei Habrit in the food pantry they do. During the time of Shavuot at Shomrei Habrit, the people you see on the left side are some of the females, the ladies that was there, including my lady on the far left. And on the other side, my lady in the center there, with two particular elders in this. All right. And I put these pictures up with permission. I'm not just putting pictures up of people or whatever like that. I did so with permission, okay? So I just want to show how the inside of it looked, and with permission, it is a nice place, all right? We was there for Shavuot. We kept it on June 5th, and it was a very, very pleasant time. All right, giving honor to the Most High, creator of heaven and earth. Israel in different parts. Now, these, correct me if I'm wrong, they out of Chicago and was part of the Ben Ami camp. The Bible talks about the string instruments in the harp. So don't frown upon playing that guitar, House of Israel. Don't frown upon playing that violin, O House of Israel. Don't frown upon those particular manners. Because as you can see, that's definitely Israel in vision. Next slide. We're going to close out. This is one of the singing groups that's in Dimona, that's in the land of Israel, and part of them in their organization. All right. So they went over to Israel, and I remember Ben Ami saying in his book, may he rest in peace. I remember him saying that, and even before I knew Ben Ami said it, I said it in my book that I wrote on Deuteronomy 28. Martin Luther King, we spoke about him earlier in his last speech in 1968. He spoke about going to the promised land. Ben Ami said that they were the fulfillment of Martin Luther King's dream in going to the promised land. Did you know that them going over there to Dimona and Rich Per Ramon is the only group, and I'm going to use the term for the lack of whatever, is the only group of African Americans that left the United States, went over there to the land of Israel by first settling in Liberia for X amount of time and then going over. The only group of people in a movement out of America to go and settle in another land, which we know is our land, is they who went to Dimona. You had individual families that went to Ghana, individual families like my brother Mighty Hebrew that's over in Tanzania. But as a collective, it was a matter of quote unquote said African Americans that number in the thousands. And the only place where a group like that went and settled is in the land of Israel. Go home when you can, O house of Yisrael. Even, and I'm going to say it online, even if you don't want to go through Tel Aviv airport, go through Amman, through Jordan, because that's where the tribe of Gad and Reuben was anyway. That's still ours. Next slide. Israelites in Ghana. Brothers and sisters, we want to show the images of Israel that you see in Brooklyn, like at the camp, that you sat there and seen in Israel that came out of Chicago and Detroit, and they that are still in continental Africa. Next part. And this is Israel shown in the wall and Sennacherib wall, and we can see how they look. Having a beard is not an accident, O house of Israel. We've shown this before about the captivity of those from Lachish. Lachish is mentioned in the book of Jeremiah. Mom, sis, and I. This picture on the left side goes back. No, I'm not going to tear up, but my mother, she's deceased. I'm always talking about that. This dates back to 1984 when I was in preschool. I remember that very day. And the lady, I think her name was Miss Susan, perhaps, or whatever her name was, that took the picture. When I was in preschool, be careful. People watch. My English name was being called upon. And I remember the teacher saying, he can't eat the school lunch. That part has pork in it. I was 4 years old. My mother has sent a letter to the school saying, I, Miss Such and Such, will be giving my son, English name, lunch. Please do not give my son the school lunch as it does not agree with our cultural diet. And the teachers made sure that I did not eat the school lunch. All right. Shout out to Basim Global Media. How you doing, bro? I want to give a shout out to Basim because that's one of the guys that dating back to like 2015, 2016. He helped me set up how to do these kind of PowerPoints live like that on my own channel and helped me out greatly in that particular manner. So shout out in that particular case, okay? Now, family, brothers, sisters. My mother came into the understanding of Israel in 1982. Sorry. I know I speak upon that ever so often. She came into this understanding of Israel, place that in the garbage, in 1982. The first teacher she had was a man named Mordeh Yehotzedek of the tribe of Gad. He used to be a salesman. My mother would pay him for the stuff that he sold. And eventually my mother was brought to the congregation called Kol She'erit B'nai Yisrael in the Bronx. Afterward, we went to a congregation from 1982 to 1990, then going to Ben Yadat until 1992, and then in Hashaba, which was located then, not in Charlotte where they are now, but located in North Carolina, located in Queens in New York. While I was in Hashaba is when the first time I was called a Maftia. When I was first in Hashaba is when I began to see more and more Hebrew. When I was in Hashaba is when I got over my fright of being able to speak in public. A brother, and I'm going to shout out the names and give him due respect, a brother named Akwedmiel Menashe. He's about some years older than me. I'm going to say that. He told me when I was 12 years old, I had the Hebrew name Emiel then. He was saying, what you got to do when you're up there speaking to the people is steer straight. Just steer straight and talking to the mic. So when I would be called up, may he rest in peace by Cohen Levy to read the 8th proverb. May he rest in peace, Kohen Malkiel, when he will call me up to read the Psalms. May the Most High continue to bless his life when Kohen Mikael will call me up to read the Torah. You understand? It was just read and keep staring. And then eventually it began to become more and more easier to do public speaking. I learned how to read not in PS 206 or the school I went to before that, PS 222 in Brooklyn, New York. I learned how to read, thank the Most High, through 2 ways. My mother having children books back in the 86 and 87 era to where I was able to sit there and read above my grade level. And going over that on Tuesday night and Wednesday night and so forth. I learned also how to read, and this is what I talk about in this book here in closing out, Deuteronomy 28, History Untold to the Masses, right? Being in there on Shabbat developed the discipline. I learned how to read. I learned how to stand straight. I learned how to be at attention. I learned how to wait until the may he rest in peace at the time, didn't realize that. I know it did in my life. You understand? And looking upon it now at hindsight, I don't mean to annoy brothers or sisters, family, when I'm on Facebook in your inbox saying when your book is going to drop. I don't mean to be a nuisance with that. But when we have Moses Farrar, who's older, Kohen Mikael, who's an elder, when you have Root of Windsor, who's an elder, we who are younger than 50, we want to put our books out there for those who are for it. The guy who runs global media, Basim, he pushed my book very hard when the Egypt Talk book was released back in 2016. He would make the flyers and everything and push and promote and so forth and so on. So I give due respect to my teachers of the past and to those currently today who support a brother. This is going to be, as stated, the last history presentation for a while due to, and I'm going to say this, in my relationship. Me and my lady made 14 months. And I don't want to spread myself too thin. I want to spend more time in getting acquainted in my relationship and write more books and so forth. And on the other side, a brother's on Indeed.com and Jobs.com. That's a personal matter, trying to seek better employment. But that's neither here nor there in that particular case. Just wanted to be known why there's not going to be any live Hebrew classes like that. For those who are interested, you can go Moreh Yeshaya Hebrew lessons. All of the links for the channels will be put inside the description. What you're seeing, brothers and sisters, on the left side again. May my mother rest in peace. A lot of those who are left us older than us who left, they don't talk about everything that they're dealing with. She passed away from cancer. And this is something I noticed with doctors. She passed away in Booth Memorial Hospital out in Queens. This is something, like I stated, that I noticed with doctors. They were giving her medicine while telling her not to take herbs. What were you trying to hide? What did you not want her to have? Why did not your medicine work, Doc? We're all going to leave this earth, but we don't want to leave too soon. We want to leave a mark that when friends of mine, even some former friends of mine, heard that my mother passed away, it was like, oh, she was such a sweet soul. That's the legacy you want to leave, not like, oh, good riddance. You understand? So that's how I learned how to read, by her teaching me with that and by reading the prayers in the congregation since age 5 and 6. May your mercies be upon us forevermore and continuously. I'm reading words like continuously when I'm 5 years old, 6 years old. I didn't understand the magnitude of it, but train a child in the way in which he will go, and when he's older, he will not depart. In other words, he will not depart perpetually. It don't mean that child won't slip up. Like you might hear me speak upon not being self-centered. After my mother passed, I was violating Shabbat. You understand? A brother wasn't living it up like that. Talking about, I'm going to go to the camp. I wasn't wearing fringes, wearing it like that. Why would you? I'm going to the movies Friday night at 26, 27, 28 years old. But we don't want to go far, brothers and sisters. We want to return back to the Most High. Do you understand? So, the person you see on the left side, that's my older sister. Love and respect her and have much admiration for her. May her life continue to be blessed. She's on Facebook too. Her name's Yakina. And here we see on the right side, the Shema Ebet Yerabam. We already spoke upon this for those who follow the channel. Here we see, this is a Pra, which is a river in Ghana. The painting of the Ashanti ambassador with the breastplate of the Levites upon him. And here in closing out, we see this. Me and the brother Moreh Yitzhak, who've been a brother and friend for some time. Like I stated. This brother put Kashub. Kashub is old, brother, but thank you for the shout out. It's Yeshaya now. Kashub is old, my friend. But I do thank you, Basim, for putting that in there. This is myself wearing the same head covering as then. And the brother Moreh Yitzhak, like I stated, a person I've known for some time and who never, ever, ever, ever moved funny style. And who actually supported and bought a book too, which I appreciate. And behind us, you see the Hebrew chart. And on the other side, you see a map of what we've been talking about. All right, for edification purposes. Much respect to the Most High. We thank you all for joining in the presentation. We want to say on a human level, thank you. Shout out to my lady Sarai of the tribe of Judah. Shout out to the brother Mori Yivtak Ben Dan of Shomrei Habrit. I personally can be reached 908-587-4841 or email YYISRAEL22 the number at yahoo.com. So with that, stay tuned. Tomorrow there is a presentation by Brew News in not Hit Magazine. It's Brew News Magazine. All right. So I think the person actually spoke in the comments. I'm going live on Brew News Magazine. I've actually mentioned them in my book here because we want to give shout out and due respect. If you look at right here, brothers and sisters, all right, the Light Hebrew Magazine, Brew News Magazine, BREWNEWSMAGAZINE.com. Advertise. These sisters who operate this are not sloppy in business. Brew News. I'm going to be on that channel tomorrow, 8:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, for those who are interested. All right. Throughout the course of years, my life has been better as time went on. I want to thank the Most High for the lady in my life. I want to thank the Most High for having the teachers who influenced the brother. And again, this is going to be the last history presentation for a while because we want to work on other projects. So give a brother a call, like, comment, share, and subscribe. Buy the books. The advertisements for them will be in the description. And since the first book was released over 6 years ago, I sent things out through FedEx. Not one person can say a brother scammed them. We don't do that. If you out there teaching history, but then you stealing the money and not giving the people the property, that's not going to be blessed. Keep your nose clean. Shalom. Giving honor and praise unto the Most High, the creator and maker of heaven and earth. Shalom.